talk about that one because the back wheel was off the ground.
Yeah, the thing just went, it was only on a very slow spot on a fairly small dune, but the front wheel just went straight into it, and the back wheel was sort of left 6 or 8 inches in the air and spinning, and the bike just laid on its side from there. I was left sitting up on the handlebars when I sort of stopped and climbed off the front of the bike. Pick got up and the thing was in the sand right up to the fairing, and it just had gone literally straight in. You couldn't pull the bike backwards, you couldn't pull it over sideways, you just couldn't get the thing out of there, so it took a while to dig around the front wheel and get it unburied enough to sort of get it on its side and stand the thing up again and get it out of there. So that took a little bit of time digging it out of there. I then came across Mark Comer later on in the stage, and I stopped with him. It was unfortunately, it was right in a bit of a, it was reasonably, what we thought was reasonably hard sand, but right in the bottom of between some dunes. I stopped alongside him, and he said he was out of fuel and sort of hinting to me to maybe assist him with a bit of fuel. I knew Joe Sala was coming, and Joe was the Repsol Ghost Rider. He was there to help them out, so I knew he was coming with fuel. So I decided it certainly wasn't my problem, and that's what they had the team for. And under the same scenarios, they probably would have ridden on and let me. So I went to take off. Unfortunately, the sand was too soft there. I couldn't get going. I had to go backwards and forwards between the dunes 3 or 4 times to get enough momentum to even get out of there. So we had a few little stoppages, but it didn't lose us a lot of time during the course of the day. But just things you sort of do while you're out there.
The following day, they also turned the next special stage into a liaison due to the conditions as well.
It was mostly the relentless wind, sand conditions. The liaison, the stage was very, very long, and they actually just reduced the last, I think, 100 kilometres of it or something. They turned it into liaison. So we still did like a 400 kilometre special stage, but they just shortened up the last portion of it and turned it into a liaison. So it actually turned the overall day into, I think, more kilometres completely, but just the last portion of it was liaison.
Stage 11, 11th of January. Very, very sad day for everyone in the sport of rally. Meone had an accident and unfortunately was killed. What were your feelings towards that?
It was a very tragic day for everyone, I think, concerned, obviously. My day started very difficult, and I had lost a little bit of time to those front riders. So I was probably 10 minutes behind them or so, obviously at the time of the accident. We had refueled, so the bikes were relatively heavy with refuel. And I was just riding and came across obviously some choppers on the side of the course, and I could see a bike down. As I went past, my main concern obviously immediately was maybe it was Alfie, because a very close personal relationship with Alfie. Later to see that it was Fabrizio that was on the course. We weren't too aware at that point in time, well, I certainly wasn't, of the severity of the accident and how it was, other than the fact that it wasn't good because he was still there. We got on to the end of that stage. It was a very tiring stage actually, and got to the end of it, and could tell by the officials and the nature and mood at the control, obviously, that the tragedy had happened. Patrick Zanaroli, the race director, was there, and he told every competitor as they came in. It was just one of flat devastation, obviously, not being massively close to Fabrizio on a personal terms, although we had liaised and spoken a lot and spent some time together, but not as close as obviously the factory team and the Gulwar team. They spent so much time a year living together and travelling on rallies and away, testing and doing everything. We got to that end of the stage. I rang home on a sat phone just for the sake of talking to someone. You needed to talk to someone and hear what was going on. We then had a 300 kilometre liaison after that down the road, and that was really tough to spend 3 hours sitting on a bike by yourself. Just obviously there's only one thing that could fill your thoughts, and a lot of questions obviously, and not a lot of answers as to why and how and everything surrounding it, and I guess a lot of mixed feeling as to where the rally would go to from there, and where personally you would go to from there, and how you'd sort of cope with emotionally struggling with something like that.
Does it play on your mind that a guy the calibre of Meone's ability and his experience, I mean, he was 47 years old, this was going to be his last Dakar, and something like this can happen to someone like him, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah, it definitely brings back to the ground that it can happen to the best, and Fabrizio was the best. The man was so talented, such an extremely good rider. He was so fit and so strong. and the ability was just incredible. You know, he spent so much time riding the 950s that anyone to ride a 950 is just such an incredibly talented person. I think it doesn't change the fact that fate can still step in and take control of whatever it likes. And you know, I'm a believer that that's the only way something like this could happen. Fabrizio was just far too talented to make a mistake and have something go wrong. And if fate steps in, then there's sort of no control. And whether we're riding Dakar or riding a rally somewhere else, or or driving home from work, you know, if fate steps in, I don't necessarily know that there's much we can do about it. Obviously, we just reduce risks as much as we can. But if you've got confidence in your own ability and you feel comfortable with what you're doing, then I don't think there's necessarily cause for concern.
The following day was cancelled for the motorcycles. How was that reached out of respect for Fabrizio?
I think it was more through concerns that the minds weren't right with a lot of the riders, especially the factory riders. There was talk of the Gaulois team first of all withdrawing completely, and then maybe the KTM factory teams, all the teams withdrawing. It was a little bit unclear where and what sort of directions would come from the factory with regard to the incident. There was a lot of questions then asked. We'd lost Richie Saint a couple of months earlier in the Rally of Egypt. To have two Gaulois riders, two of the best riders in the world, I think 4 or 5 Dakar wins between them, suddenly taken away. There was a lot of questions being asked as to why we're there doing it, and if it's going to do this to people, you know, why are we sort of pursuing it. I think there was certainly, and amongst especially the other Gaulois riders, it was very difficult time, and that with their minds. And I think the decision not to race the next day was a good one for all the riders, because the minds were not there to be riding. It gave them another 24 hours to dwell on it and perhaps make some rational decisions on whether they continued or didn't continue, and just gave everybody a little bit of time to get over it.
So following the cancellation of stage 12, stage 13, your second win, was it? How did you feel about winning that stage, given the events that had happened the previous 2 days?
I think winning the stage was great. You know, I felt fine just with the win itself. But not knowing, you know, how hard the other riders were riding, there was talk of them slowing down, there was talk of them just maintaining positions. There was all of this sort of a bit of a hype as to what they would do, where they would go from there. I believe that they really, you know, rode pretty hard. I don't think there was necessarily a lot of backing off in reality, even though, you know, there's a bit of talk of things slowing down. So it was great to win the stage. It was a pretty tough stage. There was a lot of dust again, some pretty nasty little bits and pieces in there, some rocky bits, and we started to get into some wildlife as well. So it was a good stage to win, and I think it was just as good a win as the first one that we had, but it was certainly with some other mixed emotions and, you know, surrounding some other events.
3 days to go, day 14. You won the previous day, so you get to lead. Come down around a corner to reveal a nice wide river, and you're first man on the road. And not only just a river, but there's a sizable crowd gathered to watch the spectacle as well. What was sort of going through your mind as you rounded that corner and sort of saw how wide that river was?
Safari 03 flashback after flashback after flashback. They said to us at the riders' briefing before that the crossing was there and that it was quite deep, and they recommended that we perhaps get off and walk the bikes through. So straight away you think, okay, maybe it's not so good. I had ridden fairly hard to get to there, but I'd been very mindful on the fast roads to try and look after the bike, look after the tyre, but just be very smooth. I was short shifting the gearbox and just being gentle on everything as we're getting closer to the race finish. Got into the water, and the mind starts, do you get off, don't you? How do we go through this? Do we, you know, plug along? Or and as I said, safari flashbacks from everywhere. I just snuck into the water slowly, and you could sort of see the bottom to start with, and it felt okay. And so I just proceeded to ride through, and I had no problems. We snuck right through. I didn't actually get off the bike at all, and just in and out the other side. I think overall getting out the other side might have started to get a little bit more difficult for some of the riders down the field as all the vehicles carried water out of there. So the crossing itself didn't turn out to be too bad, but some very reserved feelings to start with.
Nice big cheer when you came out of that water on the other side.
Yeah, there was a lot of people there and quite a few cameras and things, and we snuck through and got out the other side. There was a passage control just out the other side, and we pulled up for a stamp there, and I could see the chopper over top of the river again, so I knew Frantic Nate actually caught some time on me and wasn't too far behind, so that tried to spur me up a little bit from there on.
Now coming out of that river, you're leading, you're back on the gas, and then problem, rear tyre.
Yeah, we got out of the river and we got going through some quite tight stuff, and I could see Frantic Nate behind me, so I was keen. We got onto then a road stage which had about 20 kilometres of tarmac before the refuel, and so I did gas it up fairly hard down there, knowing that the 660 we could pull some time, but once again still being a little bit mindful of the tyre. We got to the refuel, refueled. At that point in time I was fastest. To the timesheets show that I was actually fastest to that refuel in hindsight, so we had been riding pretty hard and had been going very, very well. Got out of that refuel, did about another 20 kilometres, came through a village, and I could just feel the rear tyre had gone off, and yeah, the horrors of a rear moose had gone to pieces.
That cost you effectively 20 minutes, so with your speeding penalty, if you took your speeding penalty away, that moose would have finished your Dakar.
It would have taken us out of the top, potentially the top three as far as a possibility goes. It's still, it took us from I guess being a potentially a maybe top five still, and virtually canned us out of that situation altogether. But yeah, so to get into the podium position on a race like Dakar is really to go through without any troubles and have a trouble-free run. There's just so many little things now that can take you out of the running up there, and something like a rear tyre problem could do it.
Stage 15, 15th of January, this is basically the road into Dakar. Must be a sort of a relief knowing that there's 569 kilometres to sort of go. How are you feeling then?
Yeah, it was the ultimate day, and nothing was really going to be gained unless somebody had a problem of some sort. So I think everybody just settled down to ride in a routine that day and push along. It was maybe an opportunity for a few of the other riders back in the top 10 to push a bit and do some good times.
Did you find Dakar riding in an anticlimax?
It was a bit of a letdown to me personally. It's something that's been in your head for so many years. Riding into Dakar, you sort of get the feeling of riding in on a motorway, and it being a nice, nice prime city, the capital in Senegal, and just being a big grand finale to the race itself. But we rode into the most massive traffic jams I've been in my entire life. It was just complete chaos. We ride through some not so good areas in Dakar to get through to the finish area and that, and it was a complete chaos, sort of just getting through there. It was a typical African city, and it was fine, but it was just a completely reversed, I guess, idea to what you had in your head to be finishing Dakar.
Andy, after 9,000 kilometres, just one day left, one special test left to go on the beach.
Yep.
Pretty tough little test, that one.
It was a tough little test. It was basically the race was over. You've mind's relaxed. You feel like it's just about you're in Dakar. So the event itself, event proper, sort of finished. Still in the little 30-kilometre stage and in some pretty tough sand conditions. Could still end there and then. You couldn't sort of lose concept of anything could still happen. We had to get to the finish line. But really, I guess a little stage to be savoured and just have some little fun around, hopefully.
Finally over, how'd you feel?
Extremely good to get to the finish. While we'd reached Dakar, the race wasn't over. To get through the finish line, relief of getting to the finish. We didn't get to the finish the year before, so a huge relief just to get to the finish line.
Were you emotional? Did the enormity of the situation hit you?
Fairly. Probably not as much as going out the year before, nowhere near as emotional. Like the 24 hours sort of leading into that stage, you'd sort of, already had in your mind that you were there and it was finished. And in some ways it was a little bit of a letdown just not having people there to share it with. So I guess that took a little bit of the hype out of it as riding across the finish line.
Going up onto that podium to accept your medal, what were you thinking? How are you feeling?
No, that was a phenomenal feeling as far as feeling of achievement. To ride up onto the podium, be amongst the best riders in the world, and be right in there and competitive with them was just great. So a bit of a talk to a few of the other riders afterwards, and really then I guess made you feeling like you had what we had actually achieved.
The Australian Safari in 2005 has been cancelled. The Dakar for 2006 is just 6 months away. What are you going to do?
Dakar 2005, we got to the finish line. We saw the ocean at Dakar, all what we tried to set out to do. We achieved top 10 finish. But we had some problems along the way with a tyre and some penalties and other dramas along the way. There's certainly, we would like to get back there next year, do Dakar again. I'd like to try and be competitive with the factory riders and get up in the top amongst the podium and have a good finish. So Dakar's definitely unfinished business for me, and I want to be back there in 2006.